Chaos. Woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, chilling with coffee mugs, me and coffee chugs, talking education all across the nation, pushing boundaries, thinking innovation. Chaos.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to another episode on Living on the Edge of Chaos podcast. I am so excited. Guys, we don't have one guest today. We've got like a duo powerhouse of two phenomenal people that have some fantastic work happening in the AI space. But I think it's not just about AI. It's about thinking and learning and articulation and how we leverage emerging technology to continue to push what's potential in our learning spaces. And I think in the education system at large. Learning isn't by nature difficult, but sometimes the systems of education can sometimes put up some barriers. And so we've got two phenomenal guests that I have recently come across their work and started attending their webinars. And I just has opened my eyes to thinking about AI and learning in so many different ways. And so they've been gracious enough to spend some time with me to share their ideas and who they are and their work. So today we've got Kimberly Becker and Jessica Parker who are here on this show today. And I am so excited for the audience to get to know them. So let's start off with, I'll let you guys pick who wants to go first here. Who are you? What do you do? And what in the world do you got going as we stare at each other? It's just like class, right? Who's gonna break each other down?
Yeah. My name is Kimberly Becker, and my background is in applied linguistics. Jessica and I started working together on a different project. It was like an online writing center, and she has some other businesses and we had worked together on. But basically, I was a graduate student writing coach. And my research is on graduate student writing, and I really enjoy supporting academic writers. And so that's kind of my professional background. I don't know what all you want me to go into, but we founded okay.
And I'm Jessica Parker. I'm wear a lot of hats. I own 3 businesses. I'm embedded in the academic space, and all of my businesses are for mostly graduate students and graduate faculty. I also teach. I'm a health sciences educator. I supervise doctoral students through their action research projects at Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. And so I have this really interesting perspective where I have, one foot in the door of higher ed. And then on the other side with my consulting companies, before I started working with Kimberly, I would see the students who are in crisis, where the system is failing them. And so I have like this unique perspective where I see the students who, are willing to ask the questions of me and my team that they're too afraid to ask of their supervisors. And it's really helped me become a better educator. And it informs a lot of the work that Kimberly and I do.
No, I love that. So I came across your guys' work through the AI, which consumes many of us as we're trying to figure it all out. And I think we're starting to see it kind of thread its way into all the ecosystems of life and society. So I came across your work through your AI Insight Lab. But tell me a little bit about how you guys got to that point. You guys just didn't wake up and go, hey, we're going to do AI. And I know that's obvious to everybody, but I think it's important. And part of this work is for people to realize, we all have our own life journey and this idea of lifelong learning. You guys already shared a little bit about what you do and all the hats that you wear, but it's also fascinating. How did your worlds and your interest in your work converge together where now you are helping people, not just with all the things you just talked about, but also starting to figure out how AI plays a factor into all of those elements that people are trying to figure out?
Well, it's interesting. Like Kimberly said, we started working together. So I started a virtual academic writing center 2 years ago to address a need that I just noticed across the board through my consulting business and through my work as an educator, which was that many university writing centers were just not meeting the needs of doctoral level writers. And so that's what Kim and I started working on together 2 years ago. And we truthfully just kept running into the same problems that university writing centers run into. It just was not a problem that we were able to solve through human resources. So we were getting pretty frustrated with it. And then we discovered generative AI and became obsessed with it. We immediately started playing around in ChatGPT and published a study together or we at least submitted the manuscript within a month. We were just became enthralled by the technology, and we wanted to look at its ChatGPT's ability for automated writing evaluation, because we were just coming out of this writing center space, thinking about how we can scale the ability to provide timely, high quality feedback to graduate level writers. And that was really what started it all, was that manuscript, and coming out of that experience of just kind of banging our heads against the wall. Like, we're running into these same issues that traditional writing centers are running into. And that was in like early 20, and then we kept publishing, and then we discovered Mind Studio, which is like a free application layer that allows you to build AI tools without knowing how to code. And then that was really when Academic Insight Lab was born. Like, really over a period of a couple of weeks, we built out a suite of AI tools for our writing center clients, for my academic consulting clients, for my doc students. And it just took off. That was like September, and we've continued to do research. And I think the irony of all this, like with Kim, is that she's a corpus linguist. And so when I hired her for my writing center, it's just like, and what do you know? I have the perfect business partner for an AI company. So Kim has taught me a lot.
Well, I mean, I jokingly say to people, like, these are things I've been thinking about for a really long time. You know, how do we get the exact data we want from a base of, you know, a huge corpus, which is the back end of a large language model, is a huge corpus. And so this is something I've been working in, and nobody knew. You know, I would never say I'm a corpus linguist, because nobody knows what that is. And
Sounds
so,
awesome,
yeah,
though.
now I feel like the whole world is talking about it. I'm just so excited. Like, everybody is interested in the bias of a corpus, essentially. That's what we're all concerned about.
So I love that. So, you know, is I want to get into our topics for the time you guys put into the slides, because there's some really awesome topics in there that I want to get into. But as I've attended 2 or 3 of your webinars, I've looked at your work, I've kind of followed in the online space, just trying to absorb all that I can. And I try to figure out a good way to phrase this, not that it's earth-shattering, but I see what you guys are doing at that doctorate dissertation level, and trying to navigate, how do we express ideas? How do we do this work ethically, where it's not plagiarism and cheating? This age-old conundrum we've had in education forever. AI is, I know it's like the red threat level right now for so many, but it's not a new thing that's entered the space. And as I look at your guys' stuff, it makes so much sense. And where I work, I spend a lot of time in the K-12 space, and we have that topic right there just consumes, and it's so hard to get out of that mud. Like, we're like stuck in it, and we can't overcome. And I have my own hot takes on that, which I won't go over for here, because people want to hear about you. But I'm curious. I know it's obviously not new to the higher ed space, and the work you do is helping with that. Anyone that checks out your webinars and your resources will uncover that. But I'm fascinated by, like, if you guys are finding those solutions at this higher level of research and academic, the dissertation, where your jobs and careers and degrees literally could be on the line if you get caught cheating. How had you, like, give me a little bit, I find it to be your superpower, how you guys kind of thought through navigating that space in the work that you do, because I think it's not that people are just like completely against it. I just think they're not always sure how to go about thinking through it to understand how it can help and you know, play a role, but not take away all learning and thinking.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and kind of to jump in, but there's a lot of layers here. So one is that from the get-go, we started building feedback tools. So we are not a competitor with some of these, you know, other companies where, you know, it's like, write your lit review. We'll write your lit review for you. All of our tools really require the student to come to the table with something as a starting point, and then takes it from there. So then our tools meet them where they are. And that has been our intention along the way, is not to take the human out of the loop. We're all about augmentation, not automation. We think that this idea of augmentation is much more interesting and compelling in terms of our research and the focus of our work. It doesn't mean that there isn't a role for automation, but that's really the core of our ethos, is about keeping the human in the loop and how we educate others. And this is a part of like critical, just basic AI literacy. I think the fear surrounding cheating and plagiarism definitely reflects the low literacy right now. I think once people fully understand the capabilities and limitations of this technology, they'll be asking much different questions. And it's just, yeah, I think that's like just one basic piece of this is educating people and helping them understand the potential for this technology and also the risks involved. And then they'll have completely different questions. Because as you know, the students who want to cut corners are always going to find a way to cut corners, regardless of what technology is or is not available or allowed. And so we don't think about that. We don't focus on plagiarism or detectors because our work doesn't produce content that a student would be tempted to plagiarize, because we do all of this prompt engineering so that the tools coach them and give them feedback and, tell them if they say, please, just write this for me, just implement this feedback. I'm so tired. It would be like, no, my role is to guide you and coach you. Like, here's some questions you should be asking. And so because of our tools are built that way, we don't talk about plagiarism because that's not part of what we're building. But there are still a lot of questions around that. And Sarah Eaton has a lot of really wonderful research about this post-plagiarism era that we're in. And we really adhere to that framework where we believe we are entering in a time of like human hybrid AI work and writing, and that these old rules around plagiarism just do not apply. And we have to flip the paradigm and really think about this in new ways. And it's imperative for educators to take the lead on that, because otherwise students are just left in the dark. And most students don't want to cheat or plagiarize. So
I'll just add to that, kind of going back, when we first started looking at this, I mean, we are not computer scientists. Neither of us were AI experts, and we still just say we're enthusiasts. We're self-taught. And, when I first saw ChatGPT, my initial thought wasn't, oh, we could get it to write for us. It was like, my initial thought was like, if it can do that writing, then it can tell me about that writing. And if it can tell me why it's writing in a certain way, then it can tell a student to do or not do certain things, because it breaks a communicative like norm within the genre of academic writing. And we know what those norms are. And so if it falls within or without those norms, this machine can show us that. Not because, not, and so generative AI, I've been saying this a lot, like I think generative AI kind of undersells what it really can do. It doesn't just generate, it analyzes and critically finds patterns and gaps, and then it shows us that it's doing that with language, which is what a human does anyway. I mean, if we don't have the language, the linguistic resources to explain what we're thinking, then it doesn't matter how well we understand our content. And that's what I've worked a lot with second language, or English as an extra language. And with scientists and researchers, they know their content. They know their domain very, very well. But sometimes they don't know how to say what they need to say. And so this model provides all those resources for them in a way, and puts it together in a way that they couldn't quite get to themselves. But I think in watching it, just like a child watches an adult and learns language through that modeling, I think that's what happens with adults learning, a different like register or dialect of a language.
Yeah, I appreciate both of you sharing. It's such a different perspective that I think a lot of people, when they're trying to get into this journey and figure out how to get started, how to think about it, all the different entry points, most are not coming at it from those angles. So I think that's really good for those listening as you're trying to think through, that approach. I think is really nice, because you can get caught up in whatever the headlines might be. You can get caught up in worst case scenarios, but also once you try to understand more of how it does what it does, and you don't have to go get a degree in that, but the general principles, I think it does shift your approach, your thinking, and those possibilities. And I think that's the key, is getting people to that point where they can start to formulate, I think, Jessica, you talked about it, new questions, right? How do we get past that low stake question to the others? Is really, really good. So let's segue over to our slides here. And for those that are watching on the video here, you're going to see the fun that usually presents itself here. Is I have asked both Jessica and Kimberly here to give some ideas into these 4 categories that will both cover the work they do, ideas they have, the things they're excited about, ways in which maybe they've shifted some of their thinking. And then we have kind of the human element side, which I think is also important for all of us, because at the end of the day, we all have a wide range of interests and angles. So we've got some just things that they've recommended that have been influential to them. And then the category that tends to make people the most nervous, objects or artifacts. And so we'll see if the random generator pops up. So as those that listen to the show, they have the slide deck. We have it on the screen, but I have it coded that it's going to randomly take us to a category. So we're going to shake it up here, and we're going to start. We're in the orange category, something that's shifted your perspective. And we're going to see which one of you lucky contestants get to answer this one. We get to start with Jessica. She's real excited. I can tell by her face. So Jessica, you put in here, you don't have to be a technical person to start an AI ed tech company. We think we kind of already started that. So tell me more about your thoughts here.
No, I could not be more like I don't know. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be running an AI ed tech company, I would have just laughed in your face. I was laughing this morning. I installed a new printer. I have not had a printer in years because I cannot operate a printer. And so if that tells you anything about my technical capabilities, and the irony that I am running an ed tech company is just really comedic. But it also just tells you the power of curiosity. I mean, I started this just being curious, and I was just amazed, and I just kept digging deeper and deeper. And there were times where Kimberly and I would laugh because we felt like mad scientists. We could not stop building AI tools. A weekend would go by and I'd say, I have 20 more tools, let's test them. And I couldn't stop building these AI tools. And so yeah, you don't have to be a technical person to use this technology. You don't have to be a technical person to teach your students how to use this technology. You can learn on your own. I mean, Kimberly and I have somehow built this AI ed tech company completely, I'll just speak for myself, as a non-technical founder, which is quite shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, you said the word curiosity, and it reminds me of a friend of mine who's like a international grand champion in magic, and now runs these incredible magic/science museums around the world. His name's Jason Latimer, and he has a phrase that I love, and he says, "Magic is a science we don't understand yet." And so, as you're talking about curiosity, it's just that, right? We have these things we're curious about. It's magical. If you can use that inquiry and wonder to kind of unpack what's going on behind the scenes, that's the power of learning. It doesn't have to be science. It can be in anything, right? It could be how to install a printer, right? How do I get this thing to print? Sometimes you just wish it was magic and it would just do the darn thing. But I really like that perspective there. I think it's an important piece. Sometimes we have to give ourselves permission to try to do things because we can do hard things.
Yeah, we can.
All right, so let's see what we got here. Something that sparks excitement or joy. Ooh, Jessica, you win again. 2 for 2. You have the ability to create simulations for students so they can test their research ideas and understand the implications of their decisions.
Yeah, so this is something that comes up a lot with both my consulting company and my doc students is you have these new researchers who've never done research, and they are writing their proposals, and they do not understand the implications of the decisions that they're making. And what we know is that supervisors, committees, members are stretched thin, and things fall through the cracks. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a student come on the other side of data collection, and they're so discouraged because they didn't get the data that they thought they were going to get. Now they can't answer the research questions that they want to answer. And it's pretty devastating for a student to get that far into their doctoral program and then not be able to answer the questions that they sought to answer. And so we're building simulations right now that we're going to implement in the fall, where students are going to be able to test their ideas in an AI simulation environment and understand the implications of those decisions. So at the most basic level, they have to decide like not only who their participants are going to be, which is obvious, but their recruitment procedures. And then for whatever reason, maybe the supervisor or a member of the committee doesn't pay attention to that specific detail because it's embedded within, a 100-page document. And then they get to the other side of it and they realize that their sample isn't representative of the sample that they want to be able to generalize their findings about. And that's devastating. And so that is something that can be tested in an AI simulated environment. And so they understand immediately, this is what would happen if I did this or that. And so it's low stakes. There's no judgment. There's no fear of, their committee member, their supervisor thinking they're not smart or they don't know what they're doing. And so I'm really excited about the potential for that on just the student side. And what I think about what that could mean we have a big problem in like professional doctoral programs where students aren't graduating on time and they get really hung up in this phase of the development of their proposal. And I think this could help streamline part of that and scale the faculty resources that are needed to give that like instant feedback on these really important components of their research.
Yeah, it's just makes me think about, we have the learning journey, and there's obviously the things that we know we need to attain in the learning domain or space to earn our credentials. But sometimes we forget that human side, right? The emotions that get tied to the journey. And do we have the supports and structures to help when things aren't working as planned? And because those sometimes that the emotional side can be the biggest barrier when we get, just as you said, for far enough into the weeds. It's like, how do I get out? I can't reach the finish line, and I don't feel like I can get out and start again. So what do I do? Like, I mean, it's got to be a devastating feeling for so many. So that's Now we're getting to some recommended. Man, look at you! You just the random variable. Kimberly, feel free to chime in as we go too if you want to add any of your thoughts. I don't want to make you feel like you're just left out left field. That just means your time's coming. The odds are stacked in your favor here.
I'm fine.
So you've got two awesome podcasts here. How I Built This by Guy Raz and the Armchair Expert. So why these two for you?
Oh, I love How I Built This because I am an entrepreneur, and it's all about how entrepreneurs like overcame adversity and built successful companies. And a lot of it is around this idea of curiosity and risk taking and not letting your fears get in the way of your dreams and your ideas. And so that's How I Built This. And then Armchair Expert is a podcast by Max Shepard. And it's really about the messiness of being human. It's about how we often have these dreams that we're pursuing and we'll go to any length to achieve them. But then usually there's something missing. Like we're usually oftentimes, because we're humans and we're messy, sometimes there's things that we're running away from or toward because we think that will solve a problem that is really an internal problem, not an external problem that can be solved by other people or by success or money. And so it's all about that messiness and how you navigate that. And that really resonates with me. So
yeah, and he does it in such a, I don't want to call it lighthearted, but in a way that it's you find yourself laughing and smiling along the way, even though sometimes they do tackle some tough topics. Yeah, I have my latest obsession is Smartless, which is not anywhere near as serious, but that gets me through my days to hear those three guys just go at each other for a while. Yeah. Kimberly, you got any? Are you a podcast person or not a podcast person?
Yes, I'm a podcast person. Yeah, I love 10% Happier with Dan Harris.
Yeah.
And rethinking anything with Adam Grant. He has a couple of podcasts I listen to a lot.
Yeah, I'm currently reading Adam Grant's latest book right now, and I'm like trying to slowly process that. There's so much good. All his stuff is always so good.
Think again.
Yeah. Yep.
Good picture.
All right, we got the identifying object category.
Yay.
And we've got, for those that are listening, this is the hard copy of my senior thesis in undergrad, because my advisor told me once that my problem was a lack of good research skills. And that was hard to hear, but it encouraged me to figure out how to do good research, which served me throughout grad school. So, hey, it's weird just kind of talking about the emotions of navigating the spaces. This is this aligns right with that.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things that's kind of followed me my whole life in various ways. Like I was always a good writer. I think I just navigated towards being able to put words in the right order, or whatever it means to be a good writer. But then when I would enter a new context, I wouldn't know how to adapt it. And so in this example, this was at the end of my undergrad where I had been doing fine, and all of a sudden I was writing this thesis, and it was a level up. It was to prepare you for grad school. And so I brought my draft in, and my advisor was like, it's not the writing. It really is like the research and the ability to kind of synthesize it, pull it together, and choose the right research, and then put it in with your own writing in a way that supports your claims. And so that has been, I mean, that's hard to hear. That's really hard to hear. So I always have like a
Yeah.
very compassionate response when a student at any level has had negative feedback, critical feedback, constructive feedback. I mean, none of this was intentionally mean, or, it was guided very well. But, it's hard to hear that about something that's writing is personal.
Yeah,
Um,
so let me ask you this, because so much of the work that I do, not in not AI specific, but my passion overall in education is about authentic learning, project-based learning. Like, I've been using this phrase, and I don't know if it's really a thing or not, but I've been calling it like human pedagogy. Like, how do we get to the heart and the story of what we're learning? Like, how do we connect that to story? So my question to you, as you're talking about this, is like, what is good? What that's not a good question. How would you define good writing? As you're talking about this, as your professor talked about this idea, right? That it wasn't the writing, it was the research and this and that. Like, because I think that sometimes we maybe limit our thinking around writing in general, right? We think it's like the physical thing, whether it's pen or pencil or
mhm.
keyboard, but there's more to it. So in your space and all that you do, what is good writing?
I think it's the ability to put the audience as your primary priority, and put what you want to say on the back burner, and understand what the audience needs or wants to hear first and foremost. Because if you can't convey that to them, if you're not accomplishing that goal, then it'll fall on deaf ears. And certainly when I've taught undergrads, that's one of the first challenges that they face, is trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I convey this to my audience in a way that's going to be well received? Not just what do I want to say and making my points and checking off my list of things, but actually, how can I say it in a way that it will be heard and understood by the audience? And then within that, it's like, well, what do you start with, and what are you going to put in the middle, and how are you going to finalize it? What are the strategies you're going to use to guide them through? For example, when you write a dissertation, let's say it's a graduate student, and a dissertation, I mean, my dissertation was 300 pages. I mean, they're long, it's a book. And so one of the things that I used as a strategy was, like, if anybody picked this up and they went to page 147, let's say, could they orient themselves in the middle of that chapter, in the middle of that document? Would they be able to orient themselves in a
Mm,
way that made sense? And how am I going to contextualize that for them? So really, like, primacy of the audience, I think, is a huge factor in getting better at writing.
I
I
like
want
that.
to add to that because I
Yeah.
think equally as important is good writing is about process, not just product. Like, so many graduate students get in trouble, not just graduate students, but that's our primary, audience who we work with, but get in trouble because they are not proactive, and they just think about the final product, and they don't take time to reflect on their process and understand, like, what works well for them. And there's all these sort of other components, like your designated writing conditions, like paying attention to, when you get in a state of flow, what were the conditions and how can you replicate those conditions? What do you need to do in order to plan well? Like, everyone has a different process. So it's like paying attention to, maybe the next time something goes well, taking time to step back and think, well, what did I do differently this time? What was my process? There's so much focus on the product, and that's why Ayla Mott's book about writing, she calls it the shitty first draft, is like, it
So
takes the
good.
picture off. It's like, just get something out there. Or even more importantly is, think about what your process is and what works for you, and study ways to, make your writing process more productive or effective or whatever it is you may be struggling with, and learn about the processes of others and apply those to your own and experiment a bit. And it takes a little bit of that pressure off the product of this good.
Yeah, no, I love that. Both your guys' answers resonate so well with we've published two graphic novels on people who have survived World War II, where we interview them, we get to know them, we study the context, the culture, what clothing. I mean, we do all the things because we want to bring out the human condition and not just, hey, here's a whole bunch of facts of World War II, but here's someone's story that we want to preserve. Long story short, we've been fortunate enough to bring in like comic book industry experts, whether they are working for DC or Marvel or critics, and they've taken us through these kind of character design labs. And exactly what both of you were talking about is exactly what they take us through. And to me, it's been one of the most eye-opening experiences because it's some people are just like, oh, that's cute, kids are drawing, and it's like, man, there is so much into this, like the mood, the tone, like when we interviewed the person, like how do we see their body move and shiver, and those are the elements that we got to figure out how to narrate. How do we then design that into the piece? And so it's I'm so glad you guys said those things because it just feels like these like universal concepts, like this idea of process over product. And if we focus on that, the product will take care of itself 9 times out of 10. And yet here we are. And then coming back to our beginning conversation, right, where we're worried about cheating and plagiarism because we're so focused on a product, where what if instead we put our energies into the process of the learning and the feedback cycle? So yeah, that's my aha moment here already in this thing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And to tie it back to generative AI, I mean, if you're writing at 2 a.m. and you don't have anybody to give you feedback, if now that you have, a bot, a machine who's there, you can mimic, you can approximate what an audience might understand about what you're writing, because that bot can give you that immediate feedback that you are not going to get from a professor.
Right. Yeah, I've created a custom GPT for as a Socratic thought partner. And so anything I put in there, it fires back and pokes holes in all the things I'm not thinking. And to me, that has been my number one tool that I probably use almost on a daily basis in all work. Like, hey, I've got this professional development. I know what I'm talking about, but I don't know that I'm delivering it in a way that maybe others, so I put it in there and then it's like, oh man, I can't answer that question. Okay, I guess I got some more learn. It's like, it's been such a game changer for my own development to hopefully empower and help others as a result.
Yeah, it's a huge benefit, like exploring other perspectives.
Right. All right, let's segue on here to another one. The object. We've got, my dad was a highway patrolman. He stopped some bank robbers in Mississippi once, and I have the bullet that was intended to kill him. Reminds me to be brave. Holy moly. That's deep.
Yeah, do we need to say more? We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, maybe frame it in the way of like the idea of bravery. Like how has that message? I mean, you guys are doing some innovative work. You're taking some risk and leaps. You're doing things like talk maybe a little bit about how bravery has been part of your superpower kit to do the work that you're doing, because you're doing some phenomenal stuff. I think that's a key element to whatever we're going to try to do in our life and our goals.
Yeah. Well, I've always, my whole life, I've never had any professional experience other than being a teacher or a student in some. I am an academic through and through. I've never had any job other than in high school for a summer or something where I was not actively involved in academia. And so I left academia last year and partnered with Jessica on this entrepreneurial endeavor. I had to be brave. I had to trust that there was something. We made a connection, like professional connection, that seemed to really work. And so it was brave for me just as an individual to leave what I knew and what was, a very trustworthy paycheck and move into a completely different field, or not a different field, but a different way to use my professional skills, but also to trust my partner, trust her, because she does have the business background and she has run several companies before. And so, to trust that I don't need to know it all. We can balance each other out. I mean, and it's similar, like, in that situation with my dad. I mean, it wasn't just him. It was, there was a team, he had a partner
Sure.
and they were handling together. So yeah, I mean, it's not just an individual thing. Being brave also means collectively trusting that you are surrounding yourself with people who are going to have your back and who can do things that you can't.
I love that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I mean, change is hard. I don't care who you are. I don't care even if it's change for good. It's always hard. And even, I mean, as you're talking about that shift, I mean, at the time of this recording, there's some interesting legislation in Iowa around K-12 education, and quite frankly, my job is on the chopping block. So thinking about what are next steps, like as you were talking, like it gives me like butterflies. It's like, man, that's definitely the reality, and doesn't mean it's in a bad way. I mean, I like my job. I don't want my job to go, but I mean, life presents those opportunities, and so you do have to be brave, and you do have to have people that you can trust and help kind of navigate the journey. So that's great stuff. Thanks for indulging my picking down more on that story there. All right, we got a recent shift in perspective category. I'm really excited about this because I haven't made the leap. Well, I'll be honest, I haven't tried Claude yet. I've been kind of against it since I started. But this one here says, I used to think Claude was subpar, but now that Claude 3 is out, I developed a new appreciation. So at the time of this, I've got a whole inbox full of newsletters that are talking about this, but I haven't explored myself. So let's talk to me about Anthropic and Claude's new update.
Yeah. I guess now we're on the Kimberly.
Yeah, can't escape now.
Yeah. Claude, I always thought Claude was a much better writer than GPT in terms of the human kind of side of it. Seemed to be more authentic, more natural. But in terms of analytical ability, and again, like not just thinking about what it can spit out at me, but what can it do on the back end to preempt that output and what's happening behind the scenes. I haven't been as impressed with Claude, but now that Claude 3 is out, especially the Opus version, I'm really impressed. Not just with the writing, but with the analytical ability and some of those other kind of critical. I mean, these verbs are tricky because thinking is
right.
a human concept, but yeah, I'm thrilled that now there's a little more competition in the space, because our tools are model agnostic, so we really need a good backup, because ChatGPT is a busy guy. I mean, he a lot of times it'll go down and we'll need to switch. And so I feel like, if we weren't already using Claude now there is a really good backup plan. I'm very, very impressed with what they've done.
Yeah, it's exciting this is a case where I think the competition only helps among these power players. I mean, I've used ChatGPT, it's probably where I go the most, but I mean, I like Microsoft's Copilot. I continue to, but a lot of districts I support do not use Microsoft, so I try to be more cognizant of where I can connect with the things that aren't blocked or being used. And Google Gemini has gotten a bit better, and that's Google's ingrained in most districts. And I like Perplexity. I kind of bounce back and forth between Perplexity and ChatGPT. It's probably like I sift back and through and sometimes spring out. But I do have Claude 3. It's on my to-do list over spring break to get back into this now that my inbox is flooded with, oh my gosh, new competitor. So it's exciting.
Yeah, fun.
I know, right? All right. Influential books or TV shows. And we have here The Sound of Music. You get selected again. And so you have the wonderful selection of The Sound of Music, which, I was reading this prior to the recording, and I was like, I don't think I've ever actually watched it from start to finish. I think I've watched it in blips when it's been on TV, where I'll catch a half hour here. Kind of reminds me of Shawshank Redemption, catch 20 minutes here, 15 minutes here. And I've never, as I was reading, I was like, I think I just need to sit down and just watch the whole thing. So what about The Sound of Music resonates with you?
My parents were very strict when I was growing up, and they wouldn't let me watch certain movies. So there's this whole swath of 80s and 90s pop culture that I'm just completely illiterate about.
Mm.
And but I was allowed to watch Sound of Music, and boy did I I watched it obsessively when I was a child, and I can quote entire, sections of it. But yeah, I just was the whole thing, just the history of it, that part of Austria, like what was happening in the world at that time, and um, the nuns taking the I don't know. There's just so many
Yeah.
things that are interesting about that. But yeah, it's also fun. I
Yeah.
mean, the kids get a fun new governess. She takes down the ugly curtains. She makes them some play clothes. It scandalizes their military father. I mean, just all of it, and then the singing, and it's just great. It's so good.
That's great. I love it. You have such a great smile on your face. So it's a great selection there. It's
When I'm
this-
laughing, I feel like this is so revealing of Kim and I work so well together, but we are so very different. And I've never watched The Sound of Music, and I don't like music.
So what would be your go-to? What's your go-to movie if it's not Sound of
Oh,
Music? You have one
well,
that
I can't think of a go-to movie at this age, but when I think about what age Kimberly is probably talking about, my mother and I, the movie that was on repeat for me was the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze.
there you go.
I was not allowed to
Say
watch that.
that probably wasn't on her TV. It wasn't on her TV.
I don't think my I don't know what she have with like my babysitter while she was working, but I think I watched that 100 million times. I just think about the opposites of her childhood.
Hey, and it's brought you together to do some awesome things. So it all works out well. Well, I want to be respectful of your guys' time because I know you're incredibly busy. So before we get to close, I know there are several other slides we did not get to. And for those listening, we'll provide those topics. And I hope that it creates a catalyst of inquiry to continue to reach out and see what Jessica and Kimberly have going on with their work, as well as some of their other fun things that reveal more about who they are as humans. But I do want to give you a chance because there was a lot of really great topics in there. I know we didn't get to them all, but are there any that you guys ideas that you put in there that you do want to make sure you get a chance to highlight, or anything about your work before we let people know where they can find it? I want to make sure you've got a space if there's something like I really want to make sure they know blah blah blah.
I don't know. I feel like several of my slides, the answers kind of went back to this similar message, so my favorite quote is by Rumi, and it's "What you seek is seeking you." I really believe that. It ties into my favorite book is The Alchemist, and I feel like this idea of curiosity and following your dreams, especially these days, there's so much pressure on young children and graduates to like get a job. And I realize that pressure is there, but I think that I would not be where I am today if I hadn't been willing to give myself the space to dream and to try to act on those dreams. And a lot of that just requires like listening to your inner wisdom and following your intuition. And I really feel strongly about this idea of being pulled towards something and being curious about it, whatever it may be. And that's just like a common theme throughout my life. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's so good. Kimberly, anything on your end that you want to make sure people know before we wrap up?
I mean, I really liked your what's the best advice you've ever been given? And actually I learned this from Adam Grant from a podcast. And it was like advice he had been given, but I love this follow your values, not your passions, because your passions change, but your values tend to stay the same. And I think that especially for the people that we work with who are at the usually at the beginning of some stage of their career, and the graduate students are moving out into the world, they're trying to decide what they're going to research, and that's going to stay with them for a long time. So you're going to be stuck with it. If it's you don't want it, you want it to be aligned with something that about you that will not change, that can weather all the seasons of your life. So
yeah, I love that. That piece of advice like resonates so much. I just published it. Brent Manswar. He's the author of Black Sheep, and it is a phenomenal read. It's doesn't take a long time to read. And his thing is all about finding your top 5 values. And he actually has a tool that you go through, and it forces you to kind of sift through to actually truly find. And like, those are your non-negotiables. Like, if you were to budget any of those that are not actually one of your top values, and his whole premise is, and you use those to be that black sheep, like you celebrate what makes you you, but you got to know your values. And he's more focused on like how to truly identify that, and then you hold tight to that, period. And I've been diving deep into that. And so you had that piece of advice by Adam Grant. I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's just, it almost connects Jessica with you, right? Like what you're seeking, it's like, oh my gosh, it's the same message again. Like this is exactly the journey, whether I'm looking at it professionally or personally, like you do got to get in tune with yourself, because, we do have the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of life and all the things that come with it. But if we have those values, you can definitely make it through.
Yeah, it helps us make decisions about our AI company. There's a lot of competing priorities out there with what universities want us to do, what our clients want us to do. But at the end of the day, we know that one of our values is around using our tools to provide feedback and to coach and to guide us, this idea of education first AI. And so we're not tempted to go into these other spaces where, sure, maybe there's a lot more consumers out there who want to pay for something to be written for them, but that's not what we do. And so having those values, having a lot of clarity around those values really helps us make decisions about how to run our business and who we're going to partner with and what products we're going to build and who our audience is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can only imagine. I don't run a business, but yeah, if you don't have those core values, you can get lost probably trying to navigate 20 different pathways and then end up not being very good at any of them, because you're trying to please everybody, and you got to figure out what your niche is. I mean,
yeah,
coming from someone who doesn't run a business, so
no,
but I can only imagine.
Run a business.
Yeah, there you go. So Jessica, what is your best piece of advice you've been given? We got Kimberly's, and I've been asking all guests, and it's just been such phenomenal. So what's the best piece of advice for you?
I don't know if this comes across as advice, and this probably is going to come across as like a little too woo-woo, but it's around like this idea that you are the medicine, like listening to your inner wisdom, and we have the power within us to transform ourselves and to heal and grow. And that's just always really stayed with me. I wear like a third eye necklace to remind me of my inner wisdom. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, there you go.
But that's always really resonated with me. But something else that has resonated with me in terms of like communication is around, it's better to feel guilt around something than to hold something in and then resent someone else for it. So it's better to stand up and be honest about how you're feeling, and maybe that makes you feel guilty. But if you hold it in and then you feel resentment against the other person, you're not giving them the opportunity. That's not, and that leads to all sorts of issues and sort of personal, professional types of relationships. And so that ultimately has led to me being a much more transparent and direct communicator.
Sure. No, that's great. That's fantastic advice. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I always ask those questions. I feel like I'm like getting like free therapy every time I ask people the advice. I'm like, that's really good. That's really good. I gotta go process. Well, I do want to be respectful of your guys' time. This has been a fantastic conversation. We've kind of gone full circle in all the aspects, but I think it comes down to, regardless of what topic we talked about, I think it comes back to that, like keeping humans in the center, right? Whether we're talking AI and academic integrity and searching, whether we're talking the sound of music and what resonates or anything else in between, right? It's about that human experience, and how do we navigate all that's out there to be better, to how do we be better people without also trying to be miserable at the same time. I appreciate you guys taking time. You're doing phenomenal work. I'm so glad that I found your guys' work. I will continue to learn and support all that. But for people listening in, they want to know more about you. They know it'll all be in the show notes, and we'll get all that stuff linked. But if they want to learn more about you, learn more about your work, and I always like to phrase, if they're at a red light and they have a time to quickly check their phone, where is the best place for people to go to follow and learn from both of you?
We're very active on LinkedIn. ResearchGate is where we have a lot of activity with our research, and our website is academicinsightlab.ai. So yeah, any of those places you will find us, but we are most active on LinkedIn, I'll say.
Perfect. Well, we'll get all that linked there in the show notes, and I'll also link in your YouTube channel where they can track some of those webinars, past webinars. I know I've shared those with several folks. So thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful getting a chance to chat with you, and I wish you guys both just incredible success in the work that you're doing to help others and help students and everyone in between. So keep it up. You're doing great work.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron.
Woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, chilling with coffee mugs, me and coffee chugs, talking education all across the nation, pushing boundaries, thinking innovation. Chaos.